Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Invest. This is something that we believe on. There are many people who think about youth differently, but we at UNAOC, we believe that investment in youth is a great asset. They are the game changers. And we also believe that their power and their work is very enriching. And that's why throughout our different projects and programs, we seek to empower youth and strengthen their abilities. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our plenary session, which is entitled Youth4Peace, Building a Counter-Narrative for Violent Extremism. Before we start our conversation with the youth, before the High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations starts his conversation with youth in this special plenary session, I would like, as a curtain raiser, to invite Her Excellency Ms. Layla Aliyeva to the stage to give us some remarks about the remarkable work that she has been doing. Just let me give you, in a few minutes, a snapshot of what Ms. Aliyeva has been doing. First of all, she's wearing so many hats, so it's going to take a little bit more than 3 minutes to just give you an account of what she has been doing for youth and for the community in general. Ms. Aliyeva is the Vice President of the Haider Aliyev Foundation. She is a Goodwill Ambassador for FAO. She is also the head of the International Dialogue for Environmental Action. It's an initiative. And last but not least, she is the general coordinator of the OIC Youth Forum on Intercultural Dialogue. Throughout her career, her work, Ms. Aliyeva also has done work in the area of charitable, cultural, political activities, supporting youth here in Azerbaijan and in other areas. She has been helping underprivileged young people. She launched the Baku Marathon. She presided over the International Dialogue for Environmental Action, a platform for active involvement of youth on sustainable development. So I would like to, without any further ado, to invite Ms. Layla Aliyeva to the stage. So please welcome Ms. Aliyeva with me.
Dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm delighted to welcome you all in beautiful Baku at the 5th World Forum on Intercultural Dialogue, a platform to support diversity and peaceful coexistence. It's wonderful to see so many people from all around the globe, all united by the vision to make this world a better place. Rich diversity, cultural differences, and understanding that we're all connected by the bond of humanity, that's what brings us together here today. I'm especially pleased to take part in the discussion on youth role in promoting peace and embracing diversity. Young people have an amazing ability to build multiple networks and transcend all borders and fault lines. While striving for world peace and harmony, young people are often regarded as hopeless romantics. I think it's a cynical attitude, and truly believe the openness of youth for dialogue is exactly what will lead peace and prosperity. Dear friends, education does not just mean gaining knowledge and skills for professional development. Moral and spiritual education is equally important, if not more so. In this regard, family and schools are the two core institutions. The family plays an important role in preparing children for a peaceful world by nurturing such values as compromise, cooperation, and respect for all humans. Lack of these values create a vacuum that can be filled by feelings of hate, emptiness, and intolerance. At the same time, empowering young people with proper education and training is essential in order to fulfill their full potential. Young people have the ability to learn quickly and absorb as well as process tons of information. They're also more aware of protecting our environment and the magical benefits that nature gives all of us. Yet, too much pressure shouldn't be put on young people, as it shows that world's smartest people are not always happy. Some are stressed, diseased. This means we must support the youth to create a better world than the one that we have created for them, so they can enjoy the beautiful planet and live in harmony. And with the development of high technologies, the speed of our thoughts increased drastically. And our thoughts are one of the most powerful energies. It's faster than the speed of light. The world needs to invest in this potential and make sure the young generation has all the right opportunities for development. There are more young people in the world today than ever before. Their ideas and innovations could transform the future of the whole planet. But around 617 million youth worldwide still lack math and literature skills. And this means we're missing a precious potential. Youth are the embodiment of progress. Each new generation is more advanced than the previous one. It's also more humane, tolerant, compassionate, and open-minded. This is just the natural course of history. So let's help young people direct their energy at solving global problems. Let's help them help all of us. Time is the most important resource in life, so let's not waste it. Words must always be followed by actions, and we should not forget our intuition, which is a sacred gift given to every human being. Everyone can make a difference in building a peaceful and sustainable community of nations by changing themselves and improving the way they see the universe. Dear friends, like Jesus said, we should learn from children. They speak the naked truth, are straightforward, and eager to do good deeds. They're the living reminder of essential things that grown-ups tend to forget over time. That material wealth does not mean success. And that's what's important in life, is love, health, happiness, unity, understanding, and unconditional support of each other. And that's what I'd like to wish for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alieva. That was very inspirational, and we remember also your words when you spoke to our youth during the Youth Forum, which was part of our meetings that we organized here in Baku in 2016 during our 7th Global Forum in Baku. It was, they were very inspirational words as well, and we are very pleased to see that you are continuing the remarkable work that you are doing here in Azerbaijan with youth. And as you said, youth of today are more tolerant, more compassionate, and more powerful, and this is what we are trying to demonstrate here in this plenary session. You also said once that the slogan is, we must stick together and cooperate, and that's why we are all here to support those successful examples and models of youth who had done a lot in their work. So please join me in welcoming them. We now start our session, and I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Miguel Moratinos, the High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, who is going to be leading this conversation with our youth alumni. Please come to the stage, sir.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Your Excellency, Mrs. Alieva, my dear friend, Minister of Culture, all of you who come to this innovative session. Baku process is not only innovative for its commitment, engagement, but also the way we are addressing the issues with new formulas. And so we discussed with friends from Azerbaijan how we could engage in this kind of dialogue, conversation with important actor in today's politics that are the youth. Some of you, or most of you, I think you attend the inaugural session yesterday, and maybe you could hear in my intervention that I say that youth is not the future. Youth is the present. They are here with us. They are testifying how you can work with engagement, commitment, and with results. So I think this conversation is an attempt to demonstrate that we can change this negative perception of today's reality. I also say in my introductory remark of yesterday that if we can't say, are we satisfied with our work? Are ourselves succeeding in combating these trends of pessimism, extremism, hatred? And I think today's section will try to demonstrate that the people who are working on the ground with different experiences, from Somalia to Nigeria to Pakistan to Nigeria and to other parts of the world, they are ready to engage with communities and with people and change, let's say, the type of relationship they want to establish with other communities and local people. So I think today we are trying to innovate in this kind of session. There will be no monologue, there will be no a new conference. It will be an interactive session where I hope themselves will exchange some questions, some remarks, some criticism, yes, criticism, how the mandate from the UNAOC have fulfilled to them has been implemented. What can we do together in order to help them to achieve their goals? So all that have to be put in a I hope, an interesting conversation. Conversation is a dialogue. You have to start to talk, to recognize the other, to recognize that there are problems, that there are difficulties, and that everything starts with a word. And the word is a conversation. So I'm not a moderator here. I'm only one who will try to exert certain provocative question in order that they can tell us their own narrative of the problem they face in their own experiences. And I hope that we all enjoy and we extract some conclusion. So at the end, I think also the audience have to take part in this conversation. So prepare yourself. After listening to these fantastic 14 alumni that were working with the ONSC for 14 years, in the last 14 years, so I hope that we could really elaborate some conclusion after their presentation. We have divided the conversation in 3 blocks. The first one is diversity, inclusion, and community engagement. And there are 5 relevant participants that are going to introduce themselves. And you will immediately understand how important is the personal engagement. Youth has been absolutely necessary to demonstrate that against violent extremism, radicalization, youth themselves can be a fantastic tool to deconstruct this radicalization process. So there are examples that will demonstrate that it can be done and that it could be a success story. So we'll start with Neema. She was working in Somalia in a very difficult area with Al-Sabah group. Can you imagine? A young lady, French education, going to Somalia and then to negotiate and to mediate with Al-Sabah group. Well, she will introduce herself. So, Neema, better than me, it's your turn. Please, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Najma Ahmed Hussein. I work for IOM Somalia, the UN Migration Agency. And as first responders, we work in areas recently recovered from Al-Shabaab in Lower Shabelle and Jubaland. So what I'd like to do is introduce you to my work. I work in knowledge management, and we've had several interventions that were successful with youth in Somalia. So the first photo that you see is an example of an infrastructure project that had really positive outcomes. This project is the installation of 45 solar streetlights in El Jale. It has led to fewer security incidents, more community interaction, and most importantly, increased the number of business hours for local communities, which has had a significant impact in their revenue. This photo is an example of how you can utilize sports tournaments to bring together members of various different ethnic groups in Somalia, ethnic minorities. I'd like to introduce you to some of our work in Jubaland. This is an example of street theater that has contributed to increase the political participation of women. And lastly, one of our most successful interventions was with radios, utilizing radios to improve the quality of dialogue, create call-in radio shows to increase the interaction of youth with the government, and to also empower women on air.
So thank you very much, Neema. You have already engaged. She deserves a great applause. So then we move to Rhoda Siad, also young lady that has a dream, wants to be a movie director, but making the documentary. But instead of, well, dreaming to go to Hollywood, she preferred to go to the difficult task and be in Italy and try to tell the story of so many people that every day suffering, trying to have a dignity in their future and crossing this Mare Nostrum, this Mediterranean, in order to try to settle and integrate in the European society. So, Rhoda, tell us how you had been working in Italy, taking care of the immigrants, asylum seekers, and how your documentary has produced and has projected this part of a very difficult challenge. Please, Rhoda.
Hi, everybody. So I'm a documentary filmmaker based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'll just get into my presentation. We've seen iconic photos such as this, photos that are powerful in the way that they capture the global migration crisis in just one take. But these photos also do something else. They can make us forget about the 500 people that are on this boat, their uniqueness, their individuality, and we begin to think that there is one refugee experience. Mainstream news media tends to focus on polarized perceptions of refugees as either helpless victims or violent criminals. These polarized representations are dangerous, and this is what contributes to how people feel about newcomers. In recent years, we've seen or we've heard more about one form of extremism, the rise of far-right white nationalist groups. From political parties that have gained historic popularity in governments across Europe using anti-immigration sentiment, to fringe groups who are inspired by those dangerous ideologies. What remains the same is that asylum seekers are usually the first to be targeted by these groups. As a documentary filmmaker, I'm more interested in looking at the human side of the migration crisis. This is from our most recent project. It's about a refugee radio network based in Hamburg, Germany. It's the first online grassroots radio project created by refugees for refugees. And so the weekly shows provide information that helps newcomers navigate the city, but this is also an opportunity for them to engage with the German public and exchange ideas and knowledge. This network is an example. It's a challenge to the negative stereotypes and the dangerous narratives that we have about asylum seekers. Today's theme of the event is about finding a counter-narrative to global extremism. And so I believe that getting more stories like this out there is the first step. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So you can see how new technology, you can communicate to the people and transmit in place, in Germany and other places, how the people that has migrated or has looking for asylum can be a part of the society. So then we moved to Zara Markiewicz, also outstanding participant. Also, she decided to go to a very pleasant place, a country that has been under the last years under very special circumstances, that is Iraq, and a very conflictual area of zone of war, Ibril. So can you imagine how you have to decide to go there to explain your engagement? And so Sarah, she's beginning to start with what I call the new mediation role in peace and education. So Sarah, your testimony is also fundamental. Please, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sarah, and I work for Malteser International, that is the humanitarian arm of the Sovereign Order of Malta. I am the social cohesion advisor with a focus on peace building and interreligious dialogue based in northern Iraq, and we currently have a large project running in the Nineveh Plains. The Nineveh Plains are close to Mosul, and they're very special because of their ethno-religious diversity. You will find there various Christian confessions, Muslims, Yazidis, Shabak, Kakai. There are Kurds, Turkmen, and Arabs, and they've all been coexisting for generations, for thousands of years. Now, this area was under IS control for a number of years, leading to large displacement and destruction of local communities, as you can see from this slide here of a burnt house. And this is another example of a community that people don't feel comfortable returning and living in. This slide I find particularly it affects me because you see here the interaction between two communities. On the right-hand side, you might see the graffiti on the gate. It says Bakia, remaining. And this was written by IS when they came into the community. And when the house owner returned, he responded to this message and said, nothing remains except to say, thanks to God. So I'm working in social cohesion, and we are supporting our partners in the Nineveh Plains doing peace building and interreligious dialogue, mostly focusing on youth. We're doing things like building media literacy, religious literacy, youth empowerment, because the youth are the ones who are vested in their future. They want to return to these areas and build a stable future for their families, and they are investing in diversity. So we are trying to build trust between these communities through an inclusive environment. And here you see two of our project team holding an interreligious event where people are talking about fracture lines and potential to work together. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, again, another proof that even in very difficult situations, in areas you can bring two communities together, even they are different, there are important obstacles to get them engaged in a joint action, and well, Sarah succeeded. So now we move to our friend Selim Serkawi. He's really the one who got to the black hole because he decided to go and to try to enter in the most difficult challenge is to go to the prisons and try to de-radicalize the people who had been on them member of terrorist groups. So you can imagine the challenge to talk to them, to try to convince them. We all have this question, why youth or young people can't go to this tendency, why they want to bomb themselves, how what is the minds and the heart to take this decision. So Selim can share with us some of his experience. Please, Selim.
Thank you so much, Senor Monotinos. Good morning to everybody. Bonjour à tous. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom aleichem. It's a great privilege for me to be here today with you. The very first thing I would love to start to say to you here is what was the most important thing I learned by working in prison. We have a saying in French saying a falling tree is way noisier than a growing forest. Meaning here that I guess that you all ask yourself why I put this photo. This is a herd of sheep, white sheep. And I don't know if you noticed the black sheep. The black sheep is there, yeah. And once you notice the black sheep, you can only focus on the black sheep. You cannot focus anymore on all the white sheep. And this is how terrorism works. They know that in order to grab the attention, they know that they are in a minority, thinking the way they think, so the only way to attract attention to them is to become the black sheep. I would love to express my gratitude also to UNAOC that offered me the privilege to be part of their fellowship program last year. It was an honor for me. Talking about honor, I think that there is one thing more important, one value that you have to keep in mind when you work in prison before having honor to work with those persons sitting in jail for terrorism offenses. It's humility. And I think that this is one of the greatest value you can have as a good leader, humility. He's a pope, he's the pope, but he's washing the feet of a migrant. Hope is one of the best things you should keep in mind when you work in prison. Because if you don't have hope for the people for who you work, that you wish to help in order to provide them some help services, there is no way you shouldn't go to work in prison. Because if you don't keep in mind that you should work with the idea of bringing out some positive outcomes, it's not necessary. And I will end here my presentation by asking to all of you a question. Who forgot here that they once called Mandela a terrorist? Thank you.
Thank you, Selim, to bring hope to these people in prison and to give hope that we could get out of this sense that there is no possibility to really create a better world. So the final participant in this first block is Ali Abbas Saidi. Well, he had a very interesting parkour. He was working in a military corporation, and then he decided to give up and to go to the civil society to create their own group and trying to help their communities in order to eradicate violent extremism. So, Ali, tell your personal story and your engagement.
Thank you very much. It is very hard to tell a story so early in the morning. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Syed Ali Abbas Zaidi. I'm representing Pakistan Youth Alliance, Hive Pakistan, and also Kofi Annan Foundation's Extremely Together. This picture that you see here represents 3,000 people waiting to witness a hologram that will be talking about the matters to prevent violent extremism. This is from a project that we recently launched in Pakistan that uses the hologram technology to reassert founder of Pakistan's key messages on social cohesion, diversity, and tolerance. This, by the way, is for the first time that a dead figure from 1940s has been recreated as a hologram to deliver messages on peace and tolerance. This picture here shows Pakistanis from 10 different religious backgrounds gathered to launch a campaign against extremism. Extremism, ladies and gentlemen, often manifests as a hegemony of one identity or one religious group over others. So the very presence and collaboration between these diverse people, Pakistanis, is a counter-narrative. The cool squad here, which is posing with our internationally recognized Peace Rakshas project that we launched in Pakistan, it uses the canvas of an auto rickshaw to be used for peace messaging. Hundreds of thousands of people engage with our Peace Rakshas on a daily basis. We have been lucky that UNAOC has been supporting us, and we replicated this in the city of Lahore after doing it very successfully in Karachi. These are some of the designs of the Peace Rakshas. As you can see, the one on the right is like a newspaper, and it's written in Urdu in it, Deen mein jabr nahi, which translates into there is no compulsion in religion, which is a Quranic verse. So that's how we work. We use locally, culturally sensitive narratives to counter extremism in our country. So these are 3 of the 30 plus projects that we have implemented in Pakistan in the last 12 years, reaching out to about 15,000 people, campaigning for progressive values like tolerance, peace, and interfaith harmony. And this, we believe, is our contribution for a safer world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we ended this first block. I will ask them some specific question, and of course you have to ask me also what you really expect from the international community, from member states, from UN in general, or UNAOC in particular. So I was very much impressed by this discussion, this engagement with communities. So in particular, so I was very much impressed by this discussion, this engagement with communities. So Naima, can you tell us a little more, how was the way to proceed to really engage with Al-Sabah community? They received you open arms, it was an easy task, and also Sarah, you were also in a very difficult area, no? So both of you, Naima and Sarah, how you felt the first time you have to engage with this community that was in principle rejecting all kind of contact with the so-called outside world. So who wants to start? Naima?
So first of all, what I take a lot of pride in my work is the community engagement and the fact that community consultations are held before starting any kind of projects. So having the buy-in from community and having them on board and formulating a specific ask is a way to go forward. And this is a way you actually have an impact, a lasting impact on communities.
Thank you. Sarah, do you want to complement that?
Yeah, I mean, I would speak from the Iraq context. In terms of creating social cohesion, we must remember that these are very recent conflicts and very recent trauma. So we might have a desire for reconciliation, but we must respect the experience of these displaced communities. And a second very important point is that we need to be able to deal with difference. I think it's beautiful that people want to bring people together to like each other, but at least in my context, I would say that dealing with difference is one of the most important things that I've observed from there, and actually a big takeaway from the fellowship that I did last year with the UNAOC.
Thank you. And Rhoda, well, you prefer the camera, you prefer to make documentaries, but in this new technological world, how do you see how the new technology should be used? I will ask all of you later on at the end of the panel how this new technology, social media, can have an impact in this process of the radicalization and combating violent extremism. But in your specific case, how do you know images can change the perception? So how your way to work and to transmit your message?
That's a great question. I think one of the best ways to change the narratives that we're hearing about newcomers is through capacity building projects. So with the example that I gave, Refugee Radio Network received some community funding and received support at the local level, and that's really why they're able to exist. So integration for newcomers starts at the community level, and I think it's important that we create these projects and we look at these people not as refugees, but as radio hosts, journalists, entrepreneurs, whatever it is that they may be. Being a refugee is not an identity, it's a circumstance.
Thank you, Rhoda. So, to Salim and Ali, I mean, you try to de-radicalize the violence. You're more working with communities, you more specifically with prisoners. How do you find the response of a state? I was asking yesterday to prepare the rehearsal to Salim and say what he found more difficult, to discuss with the police that was guarding the prisoner or with the prisoner. And how you find the work you are trying to perform with communities and the way the state, the governments, the authorities are helping you or not helping you, how we can establish this dialogue between the state, the government, the authorities, and yourself and civil society. So Salim or Ali.
Yes, so very interesting question. I believe the role of states in the current world order, especially when we talk about extremism and the way extremism has been organized as terrorism in the last 25 years is very important. Sometimes we feel, civil society activists from different parts of developing world, we feel that the states are not patronizing us as much as they should, which means that we would like more support and more trust between the civil society and the state to work cohesively to counter extremism or hatred in that particular area. This is besides the fact that states have been responsible for most of the violence and most of the wars that have led to extremism in the first place. So with many people sitting here from different states, ministers and all, I would request you to consider this when you're making a foreign policy or doing an intervention in a foreign country that directly impacts the effort that people like me are making on the ground, because it simply nullifies it.
Okay, Salim.
To answer directly your question, esta cuestión es el corazón de la cuestión. That's the heart of the question. The most difficult thing and the biggest challenge we have to face as young people working in very challenging environments is that we are totally underestimated as young people, not having the answers, by thinking, how come a person like him or like her, without any experience, can provide any solution here? And I will not ask you to trust me, but I will just ask you to experience it. And I will refer to Miss Leila Aliyev, who said, as Jesus said, she quoted Jesus saying, we should listen to the children. And this is the key, because young people, kids, children, they have the answers to all our problems we have to face in the world. On an international level, it's very, very important. And why? It's because they still have a lot of creativity, a lot of things to share, and they don't have any filter. So they don't have any social mask. And it's very important, and we should take benefit out of it. And I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Salim. Well, before we move to the second panel, the second block, you want to ask me something? Or you are so satisfied that you are in UNAOC, you have no any criticism? Everything fine? Well, so good. So, you see, it's a successful story, you know. Okay, so thank you very much. We applaud them for this fantastic experience. Thank you, all of you, for the... So now we move to education. Education, the key issue of any initiative, is above all one of the main challenges we all have. But education to try to fight violent extremism. So how education could provide the tools, the setting of the minds to really overcome this tremendous challenge we all have. So we have 4 panelists that have been working very hard in each of those in very important areas. And so the first is Fatoumata Kebeb. Well, You look a very shy lady, but she's an astrophysics. She's been working at NASA. So maybe sometimes her mind is in the space, but she wants to have the mind of space to go to the Earth. And instead of going and try to be in a laboratory to investigate or research in physics and astronomy, he decided to teach physics and astronomy to the local communities. And local community is very controversial in the France district, cities that have a lot of integration problems. So it's a real fantastic experience how a knowledgeable scientific lady is engaging with local community to teach the people to understand what is the world, what are the physics, what is the sense of our Earth. So Fatoumata, please can introduce yourself.
Thank you. So 4 years ago, I did the fellowship of UNAOC, which one of the themes was about youth empowerment. And I had to meet with people working on how to bring knowledge to the young population despite of their social background. So I'm both French and Malian, and France has one of the most unequal systems of education in Europe. So if you take the example of 2 kids at the end of middle school, the one who's going to one of the best schools will at least learn 80% of the skills needed in French. But if you take a kid going to one of the worst middle schools in France, he will only learn 30% of the same skills, which means that at the end, they won't have the same chances and opportunities for the future. So I have an association named Ephemeride that teaches astronomy to the young people living in Paris and its region. And also, we take the opportunity to take those kids to meet with people working in the aerospace field. So here it's an example at the company Arianespace, who's building the rockets. And also, we have an antenna in Mali, in West Africa, where we teach mathematics, physics, chemistry to girls mainly, because only 30% of the girls have the chance to go to school in Mali, and sometimes the education system took away the scientific topics from their education. So here it's an example of an activity where after learning about the solar system, they had to do their own solar system. So here's the final product. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, you have noticed how important it is to engage the new generation with this important and I would say innovative thinking and science. So we move to Jorge Chavez from Peru, that also has been very much engaged in education program in different local communities. And I think, he will tell us also how, to fight terrorism and to have notice how you can deconstruct the minds of the terrorists is important. So, Jorge, it's your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Representative. I would like to thank our Azerbaijani hosts and the UNAOC for your continuous support and trust in our work. When I was 5 years old, I realized how violence could darken a life. My father, who was then a police officer, became one of the thousands of victims of terrorist violence in my country, Peru. 21 years after that tragic event, I had the opportunity to begin working with victims like him. The university where I worked, USL, became partners with Beca 18, a government-funded social inclusion program that provided scholarship for students from the poorest and most violent regions of the country. Among them, we had former soldiers and victims of terrorism who, instead of getting a financial compensation, received education as a means of reparation. These students got stipends, got psychological support and tutoring. But after attending the UNAOC summer school in 2013, I thought, what else can we do to further integrate them into our university and into a global community? And therefore, I created UCIL Ambassadors, an organization that brought them together with international and local students by organizing social and cultural activities and conducting workshops on peace education, communication skills, and leadership. We also channeled scholarships for them to study and work abroad. And when I see the effects of the work we did, I see the great power of education as an enabler, as a counter-narrative to violence, and as a creator of future. My father always said that in the bad times, and especially in the worst times, it is better to light a candle than to curse darkness. And I believe that when we educate, when we empower victims of violence, we don't just light a candle, but indeed, what we do is we turn on a lighthouse for a whole community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorge. Yes, we have to light a candle in order to see clarity and hope. And I think that your experience and your personal engagement with this social inclusion program are fundamental. No, thank you very much, Jorge. Well, we then go to Leluni. She's been, of course, working very hard in Sri Lanka. Of course, that gives me the occasion to pay tribute to Sri Lanka people for what they have suffered recently, and I think we all are behind you. I really share this thought with your authorities. I'm coming from Sri Lanka, and to have you here, it was decided before, shows that nobody is excluded of this kind of barbarous act and activity. So, but you were working after one also very, very difficult and challenging time in Sri Lanka, after the war on the north, a civil war, and you tried to reconcile old communities. So, please, Neruni, tell us your personal project and the engagement.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Also for the solidarity from the international community, it means a lot. So I'm Nalini, I'm one of the directors of Sri Lanka Unites. Sri Lanka Unites was a youth movement which was set up just as the war ended 10 years ago to avoid the possibility of another armed conflict in Sri Lanka. We have trained thousands of young people from all 25 districts of the country to be peace builders. So what did we do to convert purposeless, ordinary youth to be champions of peace building? We used multiple sources of formal education and formal approaches such as cross-cultural exchanges and inter-religious dialogue. But our trick has been catalyzing friendships. We have catalyzed meaningful friendships between young people across ethnic and religious lines. Any young person who walks into the movement knows that there is somebody who values them for who they are and what they believe in all parts of the country. And we've also invested heavily in Youth4Youth mentorship, where young people will look up to non-violent role models instead of violent role models. So they will look up to us, their older brothers and sisters who endorse non-violence no matter what happens in Sri Lanka. So this photo is about the support that UNAOC has given us. Last year, UNAOC supported Sri Lanka Unites to design a formal education curriculum with 7 modules of lessons that we have observed in the last 10 years that are the most important to help change the thinking pattern of a child. So UNAOC was very gracious with the support through the Youth Solidarity Fund, and UNAOC supported us and let us design our own solutions, which I think was one of the most important things from that experience. So 10 days ago, Sri Lanka was a victim of an international terrorist group who took 250 of our lives. And this was a test for Sri Lanka Unites and the validity of our work, because for 10 years we have been almost preparing ourselves for this. And I'm really happy to say that we passed the test. Thousands of our young people stood up and said, no, hate has no place in Sri Lanka. So we're happy to say that the culture of violence that we embraced 10 years ago with the end of a civil conflict, we are now changing it to a culture of peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Naluni. Of course, I mean, the success engagement up north and to reconcile, the people of Sri Lanka was a success, so now you have to expand, to expand what is happening. So, very good. So, before we close this panel, we have Sarah Zaini, working on education, is a writer, but of course is teaching and works for the education in Saudi Arabia. And she can tell us how important is also the education from the early age. And so we are very pleased to give you the floor, Sarah, to explain your project and how you've been working in the recent years. Sarah.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you all for your attention and being willing to listen to our stories and our projects. So almost 5 years ago, my partners and my wonderful team you see in this photo decided to establish our company, Imkan Education. And we were focused on our mission, which is to become agents of change in the societies we serve, in Saudi in particular. Most of us grew up and were educated in Saudi Arabia, different cities. And we were not very pleased with the quality of education we received. And at our generation, now that we are parents, we wanted to make sure that we give better opportunities for our children. So we're very keen at our company that we select our projects and we select our clients, and we only work with people who share the same set of values and share the same passion and the same purpose. One of our most valuable clients is Kunskapsskolan, which is a Swedish operator. They approached us almost 4 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, to develop the Arabic version of an international learning portal. Now, the beautiful part about this portal is that it gives students the platform to connect with their counterparts around the world. And we were particularly interested and excited to revamp the social studies curriculum, because it's a very important subject to instill values and teach critical thinking skills and expose students not only to other cultures and other civilizations, but to invite them to dig deeper and ask critical questions about their own beliefs. Another valuable partnership we had last year was with the DQ Institute based in Singapore. DQ stands for Digital Intelligence or Digital Quotient, and their programs focus on students between the age of 8 to 12 because they're very vulnerable and they start to use social media with less supervision. So it's very critical that they have enough analysis and enough skills to analyze online content that they're exposed to. So all in all, we believe that we have a very long way ahead of us, and it's not about the number of students or teachers we train, but it's about living in communities, like you said, living in communities where you see the change you desire embedded in your community. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, education, as Sarah said even at the end, well, there is new challenge in education today, digital education, new technology. We can't provide the main set of values and principles to everybody with new technology. So one question to all of you four, I mean, education, everybody agrees, is the key, but are you satisfied with the education textbook? Where we have to start from the primary? One primary is done, we forgot about how to continue to share values and principles. So what will be your recommendation, Sarah? You have been working hard, and then, yes. Okay.
So one important challenge, especially in developing countries when it comes to defining curriculum, they usually look at it as the textbook. The curriculum is the textbook. And in centralized systems, in very traditional systems, there's usually a supervisor of a supervisor who's supervising the teacher and controlling every single breath they take within that curriculum. So I believe the starting point is to redefine curriculum and make it more skill-based, more value-based, rather than just mere knowledge. And this is why sometimes I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to introducing new curriculum and new programs, because a huge part of that is embedded, or the success of that is dependent on teacher training and the quality of teachers you have. Because I have seen programs on critical thinking skills, And what happens inside the classroom is that students memorize critical thinking skills just to pass the test at the end of the year, and that defeats the whole point. So working on curriculum has to be systematic, and you have to look at it from a comprehensive, holistic point of view.
Thank you. Melanie, you want to add something?
Yes, so your answer was a perfect answer for what I wanted to say. So Sarah kind of pointed out what could go wrong in a curriculum, and this is what we tested out with Youth Solidarity Front from UNAOC last year. What we did was we used the observations of the last 10 years of what makes a child's thinking pattern change. And we used all those lessons and we turned it into a guidebook. So if I could just touch on some of the things we include. We talk about the history of conflict, because the history of any country's conflict is something that sometimes even peace builders don't touch upon. But it's such a part of what a young person is, because their parents talk about it, their grandparents talk about it, their school teachers hold on to it. But we need a youth organization to sit them down and talk about the history of conflict. We talk about the present, we talk about the future, and also the curriculums are designed in a way that young people are willing to engage, including activities or videos. We use social media engagement as a part of the guidebook as well. So it's very true. If in our school curriculums, we don't have a conversation on peace building at all. They just say, okay, Sri Lanka has 4 ethnic groups, 4 religious groups, that's about it. But then what we do through the guidebook is to look at the gaps in the existing education system, and we make sure we address all those gaps through our book.
Thank you. Jorge or Fatoumata, do you want to add something?
I think that one of the greatest challenges of education in a country like mine is that given the geographical and cultural diversity that we have in the region, sometimes educational contents are too rigid. Like they respond to the reality of our capital, of our city, of our urban landscape, and doesn't really meet the expectations and the realities of those who live in the highlands or in the Amazon. So I think the contents need to be, of course, there needs to be a basic structure in terms of competences and learning that is expected, but they should be adapted to the realities in the ground in order to better respond to the needs of the students. That is really important. And I also believe that besides formal education, non-formal education is a great way of bringing kids, youths, and adults together. And I think that is also a very powerful way of breaking the cycle of violence. Because if we teach non-violence at schools, but then they see violence at their houses, that is a behavior that they replicate. So non-formal education can be a huge enabler for breaking that cycle.
Very good, Jorge. So Fatoumata.
Yeah, so in fact, we're trying to work with kids as early as possible to avoid them to have prejudices on what it is to be a scientist or to be, I don't know, engineer, etc. Because, for example, for the girls, it has been shown that from a young age, the society and the teachers will teach them to take care of the others and to avoid mathematics, physics, for example. So that's why even in the sciences, most of the girls will go to biology, because in biology, you take care of the other. So this is why we are trying to work as early as possible, and we do not interact a lot with government, because I think that it's too much work, too much time, too much money.
Thank you. So I think we can get a conclusion. I mean, the curriculum should to be redrafted, as Sarah said, have to be adapted, as Jorge, to the reality, and then have to be, a permanent change in order to understand and to convey the important message. So, well, thank you very much. You have some questions to me, or Jorge, you want to ask us some particular question? Meluni, okay.
How could you compare how peace education was during your days of studying maybe in school and how you see it now?
Sorry?
Do you see a difference in how peace education is addressed from the time when you were in school as opposed to curriculums now?
Well, I think it's a tremendous change. I think in my time in Spain, the education system was a traditional one, a Western-oriented one, And we are now, and that's another conclusion of this forum. Yesterday was a session about global education citizenship. We have to combine what Jorge said and Fatoumata. I mean, you have the local realities, but the same we are trying to convey global challenges, global principles. So Sarah showed one slide of this universal education, no? This one, educating the global generation. We are part of this global generation, and at the same time you have to understand the complexity, and so that has totally changed. No? In my time, we have a very traditional curriculum, very well established. Today, the technology and the new way to teach is totally changed, and we are only at the beginning, because the new technology will change, I hope, for the better, the way to teach. So as we are running out of time, we move to the third panel, Peace Building and Interreligion Dialogue. Anka, you are the one who's been working hard in this area. So what is your presentation and you're being engaged? Please, Anka.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. My experience has been both at grassroots level in youth-led organizations in my country, Romania, as well as at an advocacy global level. And this has been because I had noticed a disconnect between what was happening at a local level and what was going on at a global policy level. And you see here a picture of a big success in 2015 when the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security has been passed. And that's very important because it was the first time that it provided a global policy framework for youth in peace and security. And the resolution has also called for independent progress study on youth, peace and security, which for the first time has given us more information on what exactly young people are doing worldwide in peace building. And the reality is that young people are very active towards working towards sustainable peace. Their work is very diverse, spans very different social constituencies, and transcends geographical borders. All of this while their work, their operation, is 97% led by volunteers, and half of them work with budgets of under $5,000 a year. So the challenges are also there and very important to notice. One last idea I want to bring forward is that preventing violent extremism, we now know, is best addressed by addressing the violence of exclusion, and this takes place at very different levels: economical, political, legal, and social. And our homework, now that we know all this information, that we've spoken to young people about it, is really in whatever spaces we operate in our daily lives, be it civil society, be it government, or academia, is that we make sure that we include young people not as beneficiaries or target group, but actually as equal partners, because they are totally up to that challenge. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Anka. Thank you for your experience as social inclusion, very important. Then we move to Pastor James Iman Muhammad. It's a success story, but very difficult at the beginning. So I prefer not to unveil what is this story, because I think both of them can explain much better than myself why they are here today with us. No? So please, Pastor James, it's your turn. You can stand up if you feel better.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will follow the youth as they lead. I am here to say thank you to UNAOC and to the host country for making this happen, particularly for granting young people the space. We are here slightly on the other side of age to bridge the generational gap and to be mentors to these great people that are sitting on this side of the table. I have here, as for those who can see, it's an artificial limb. I lost it in fighting the Muslims in Nigeria about 25 years back. And I did that because I was programmed to hate. But today, I know better. So, what do? I'm here to say to all of you listening out there that it is time to invest in the next generation. And how do we do it? By putting a clusters of religious and traditional leaders to start a deprogramming session for young people. Here you can see they are cutting across religious divide, teaching them how to do no harm in what they do or what they say. Because we were programmed to hate, we are teaching them, we are programming them to love. And to love is to forgive. And here is about 500 young people that were put together in an epicenter of crisis in northern Nigeria, Plateau State in particular, where we brought these people together to say, enough of killing. And they form a political party. They call it the Forgiveness Political Party of Nigeria. They are out there preaching forgiveness instead of retaliation. Taking the message, thank you, to the street. Every average Nigerian will buy a radio handset when he earns his first salary. And we do that taking the messages to change the negative narrative into a positive narrative on the web, on the airways, and on the radio. And we have clusters of young people today, imams and pastors, going around the state of Nigeria and trying to build structures like we have built. We are so excited that it is working and it is possible to mentor young generation and change the negative narrative, the hate speeches that we have, to a positive one, an inclusive one. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, James. So, Mohammed, how you met Pastor James? It was a friendly meeting, the first one?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Distinguished brothers and sisters, I greet you with the greeting of peace. Ours is a journey of hope, as my colleagues have said. It's about creating a space, looking back into our culture and traditions. What are those good nuances, good values, cultural norms that build bridges across the divide? And identifying them, bringing them up, so that we can be able to transfer it into our youth who may be vulnerable, who are often vulnerable to so many factors like the Boko Haram, etc., in our society. And if you look at these programs here, we brought in the traditional leaderships, the youth groups, to come together and give us those positive cultural, inclusive cultural norms, inclusive cultural values that can be transformed. And that takes us to the next level. If you look at the next slide, this is where we have worked with very strongly across Sahel region. The pastoralists and the farmers conflict is a key important conflict that have been sustained violently by youth who have been used across the divide. And what we did was we got a seed grant after receiving the IIA award, and that seed grant was used to develop a protocol, a working document for engagement within the pastoralists and the farmers. And this document is now at work, and we break it into pieces, and what we do is move to schools below the age of 15, because the most technical age of the child is 0 to 15. That area, whatever you plant there, stay there and stay in there. So we go to schools, both formal and informal schools, and we produce most of this material, helping our children to be able to see the need for them to learn the culture of peace and inclusiveness. And it's not only that alone, we move into documentary films. We have produced about 7 different documentary films, some by the BBC World, by the Love of Tomorrow, and of course by Oprah Winfrey, documentary of beliefs. Most of these documentary have been translated into about 16 international languages, and they are used across different parts of the world. All these are material tested and trusted that can be customized in different contexts, not just religious contexts, it may be ethnic, maybe racial contexts that have been used. That's why we are so grateful to UNAOC for giving us that opportunity to produce those working documents. And some of them have been used, and we are still been using them. So I want to thank you very much for these opportunities. We have so much to share and so much to learn as mentors, mentoring the future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhammad. for tremendous experience and testimony that can be done, no, between different religions and this community of joint dream. So we moved to Nevena. She had decided to use one of the, I will say, most popular, at the same time more catalyzer instrument that move the world today. I mean, sport is something that we all share, we all embrace, everybody is happy. You will see football team is a kind of alliance of civilization when they play Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, whatever. And then what happened? Sport can unite, but at the same time it's not used in the appropriate manner. So, Nevena, what is your dream? What is your engagement and using sport as a good, positive instrument? Please.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Hello, everybody. It feels good and privileged to be back in Baku as a UNAOC fellow in a city where first ever European Olympic Games was held 4 years ago. After a career of an athlete, I started to work in sport for development and peace. Not because sport is a tool for peace, for sustainability, or a tool for embracing human rights, but because I genuinely believe that sport is not a tool, but sport is a peace. Sport is sustainability, and sport itself is a human right. I've been working across 3 key areas while working in sport for development and peace. Firstly, I've been developing networks where young people could felt empowered through and by sports, where young people were voiced through sports, and where they were learned to share common values and embrace diversities. Secondly, I've been coordinating programs and projects across Europe and globally where soft skills and life skills have been learned through sports. And in this way, young adolescents and children world have been integrated in societies betterly. Learning soft skills through sport helped them to minimize the risks of streets, of dropouts, and maximize the strengths and defense of the young adolescents. And thirdly, I've been taking part in implementing of safe spaces through sport, safe spaces for youth, for children, for girls, for refugees, for people with disabilities. Sport was a safe space for me. When I was 10 years old, me and my brother, we were for 78 days living under the bombs in my city of Belgrade in Serbia. But our parents were taking care that we never stopped playing, that we never quit playing sports. So sport for me was a safe space and was providing a hope in dark times.
Thank you, Nevena. Thank you very much. And again, sport is a very important instrument. People now start to, of course, focus on sport activities, but not only the big games, the big cup, but also a social instrument, no, in municipalities and local communities in order to put people together. So the final intervention is from Taras. You've been working inter-religious dialogue, in certain interfaith dialogue. So, Taras, what's your personal experience and how it works in your country, in Ukraine?
Good morning, everybody. It's always fun to be the last speaker. I hope you are still awake. My work is often described as inter-religious peace building. Now, 2 big words, right? Certainly you can say that one can do peace building without ever being involved in interfaith dialogue. However, if one is doing interfaith dialogue, it's really necessary to say that he or she is involved in peace building work. Now, the peculiarity about interfaith peace building is that actually it is one's religion that inspires one to act, to be a peace builder. You know, throughout history and in the media today, we see that religion and religious teachings are often manipulated to incite violence, to provoke discrimination. But yet there are millions, perhaps billions of people in the world for whom religion is very important and fundamental in their lives. You know, I come from Ukraine, a country that was under the rule of communism for so many decades, and in the Soviet times, religion has been seen actually as the opium for the people, as the drug for the people. And we see religion differently. We see religion as being a medicine that can heal the wounds of society. And actually, religions are important because they're the sources of values, the sources of hope, inspiration for societies. Religions are important, and especially interreligious dialogue is important because it has the great potential to create an inclusive narrative about the other. And I would like to give you just 4 concrete examples of how my interfaith work is translated into peace-building work. First of all, in the field of empowerment, we organize a lot of meetings for young people, where through the IRD platform, we empower them to give voices to women and youth. Then this is interfaith peace festivals, where we invite religious leaders to talk about body, mind, and spirit to be connected through the platform of IRD. Also, in the sphere of media, we had the award-winning project inspired by the UNAOC Fellowship, by the way. And this project was called the School of Interreligious Journalism. And another project that won the award was integrating refugees and migrants into workplaces of companies using IRD approach.
Thank you, Taras, for your experience. And to put the interrelations dialogue as one of the main, I will say, possibility to deconstruct this tendency to violent extremism. So I will put to you 5 a question, general question, whoever. I mean, we are now witnessing more and more the call and the setting of religious leader conference, religious leader global summit. After your experience, what do you think? The religious dialogue should be done by religious people? Only James and Muhammad have to meet together? Or you prefer Taras' approach that is say, well, we are going to have with social elements of society this interfaith dialogue? Because what is true is that spirituality today cannot be avoided. If we want to really overcome the problems of today's world in this globalization element, well, identities came because people are confused. So they hunt themselves in this religious element, but sometimes they don't understand that this identity can be a killing identity, like Amin Malouf used to say. So what will be your recommendation, Anka? You have to, how you organize this interface, interreligious dialogue? What will be your position, Anka?
I think I have seen in my work the value of interfaith dialogue. For example, having worked with an organization in Indonesia, youth-driven, and they've noticed that there was a big disconnect and downright hate between 2 religions. And they've developed some very interesting spaces where young people started to communicate with each other, starting to know each other. And then they realized they actually really like each other and they have nothing against each other. So I have seen some very concrete examples of how it works. And I wouldn't say that everyone working in interfaith dialogue necessarily defines themselves in a religion or another, but they do see the value of creating the spaces for people to interact with each other and acknowledge their diversity and celebrate it.
Acknowledging the diversity, that's a good word. So, James, Mohammed, you will talk only among yourself or you address the community? Eh? Both.
Ours is we're a living example. We pass through the nasty part of hate and we move to the part of inclusiveness. So our story is the toolkit for engagement. And to do this perfectly in most communities, like the case we did in Tanzania, in Kenya. Kenya is a more of a cross-ethnic political conflict. But when we get into Kenya, we didn't use religion. We use other level of their identity and share common bond to engage. And we have what become an African answer. which was the outcome of that intervention. So it's not that you need to be religious to engage in religious dialogue, inter-religious dialogue, but you need to know the nuances. You need to have the sensitivity to what it takes to engage, where is he coming from to engage in inter-religious dialogue. This has worked effectively, and you can see, even using our documentary, one of the most important examples we have is Germany, where our documentary have been used in a community that the engagement tools was the issue of migration and other level of identity. So coming into Hamburg and helping the Hamburgers to engage among themselves, youth in Hamburg to engage, even in schools, in public schools in Hamburg, we use this tool to engage, and the outcome was fantastic. Everybody wants to be an imam and a pastor, even though in his orientation, he's a free-thinking guy. He believes, yes, I can do this. We can move across culture. There's nothing wrong with our identity as long as it's a positive tool to open doors and windows.
Very good. So,
well, for me, it's forgiveness. You cannot settle dialogue without forgiveness. One has to say, though this time around I felt shortchanged, but I'm able to move forward. And so without forgiveness, the cycle of violence will continue. There will be no world to live in if we don't learn to forgive. And so to do this, you have to invoke spirituality, culture, and humanity. In doing dialogue around that area, you can get people to shift their position. I recommend today that all of us here, if you have somebody in mind, say, I'm sorry, and forgive. And that will start the journey towards lasting peace. Thank you.
Tell us some word on that.
Yeah, I think really forgiveness is the key issue here, because in most religions, forgiveness is really that which, makes people open their hearts to the other. And I had actually a story of a Nigerian person whose family was killed in violent conflicts, and then he's attending a lot of dialogue meetings, and I say to him, how are you able to do it? I mean, your family was killed. It's not the matter of, academic dialogue. It's really the matter of life. And he says, Taras, if not for my religion, I would not be able to forgive and not to go forward. So religions are really the sources of so many different values and to keep us changing the society for better.
Okay, Nevena, the sport activities is a miracle. They play together, they enjoy together, they respect each other, there is a team, there is some values and some principles, some rules of sport. Can you tell us why in sport is working and we were out of sport? They go back to this confrontational attitude. So how sport could be a reference, a model to really expand in other social areas?
There is a question that athletes are always asking themselves from one Olympic Games to another Olympic Games. It's why the Olympic truce period lasts so shortly? Why only 4 years between between the games? Why it can't be prolonged? Maybe because we are stopping playing once we grow up. We forget to play with each other. We forget to speak the universal language. That's why it's very important what we heard a couple of times during this morning discussion is that young people can't be seen only as volunteers at events or as victims of the historic events. They are equal players. They are equal players in the field during sports games, but they shall be perceived as equal players during the decision-making processes as well. This is how you will apply why sport is successful, because usually sport that millions are watching are played by youth. Why don't we transfer those youth and those values into the daily politics? That could be one of the ways. And as a great example of playing in one team, no matter of your flag or no matter of your values, were the example of the Rio Olympic Games, where for the first time we had a team of refugees playing under the Olympic flag. So this is possible. Just we have to never stop playing.
Okay, thank you, Nereva. Thank you, all of you. Now there is, I think, general question to all of you. I don't know if it's going to come to the screen. No? No, so I have to improvise. Okay, that's good. Anyhow, so to all of you, to the 14, two general questions. I mean, we are now today confronted with what we call the hate discourse, the hate speech, the hate. And whoever wants to answer will be for you the best way to really avoid, stop this hate that is expanding all around the world and all these communities. So who want to take the answer to that at the beginning? Sarah? Okay.
So one of the main outcomes out of the fellowship that I was part of in 2016, I don't want to use the word hate, maybe it's not the right description, but one of the main outcomes, we're two batches, the MENA region and then the UNA region. And one of the most fascinating outcomes is that we, the MENA region, we found it extremely interesting for us to learn more about one another. Although I go to Egypt as a tourist, I go to Lebanon as a tourist, but I never really had a not heated, but a deep discussion with an Egyptian, with a Lebanese, with an atheist Iraqi lawyer. So all of that, just being open to intra-cultural dialogue was an eye-opening experience. So I believe maybe the first step is to create a safe environment to practice intra-cultural differences and to acknowledge them and to respect them and bring them at the forefront of any discussion, and then we can move forward. Because if we are in denial, there's nothing that we can do about that.
Okay, thank you. Jorge, you want to say?
Yeah, I think that in order to break this cycle of violence, inclusion is very important. Of course, capacity building, doing workshops, it's a part of it, but I believe that education is a great way of empowerment. When I was working in this project of social inclusion, a lot of people criticized this project saying that they cost a lot. And my response to them is, yes, social inclusion costs, but social exclusion kills. So giving these opportunities to change their lives to people who have been through violence, who have this hate, these grievances in their life, is a way to empower them and to give them a new life where violence won't be there anymore. It's a way of transforming them and transforming their communities and also reducing poverty and exclusion in those communities. So I think investing in inclusion, it's crucial for working against violence.
Thank you, Jorge. Yes, Taras.
Just a few words about the power of interreligious dialogue to counter those narratives of hate and hate speech. You know, during a lot of dialogue conferences, we all come and we talk about the commonalities, the common grounds that we have. We sell nice words, but it's a challenge, you know, how to bring those people who disagree with us. And one of the projects that we actually launched, and this project was inspired by the UNAOC Fellowship. It was the project that's actually looking at the problematic passages in the religious traditions, teachings in the Quran, in the Bible, in the Jewish scriptures, to see these problematic passages and what do we do with them? I mean, we don't have an answer to that, but it's a very important thing to move forward with not only saying again, nice things in dialogue, but to say, we disagree, let's talk why we disagree, let's find the roots of these disagreements.
Okay, yes.
Just a clarion call to all of you here that we should act quickly. Anyways, UNAOC should scale up projects that are all here to reach out to more people. As I speak to you today, yesterday there was bombing, there was killing by Boko Haram. And we also have West African ISIS. Through education at the grassroots, through scale up, through putting down quick intervention fund, we can nip the problems in the bud and prevent radicalization by counter narratives. Imams like my imam and other clergies should be put together and be given capacity to engage quickly with those ISIS, West Africa, Boko Haram, and the government in the region to stop this killing through dialogue.
And in addition to that, there's the issue of de-radicalization. Youth who are already engaged or who have been programmed, they are at the edge periphery. They are programmed to hate. They just look for opportunity to engage. The need for our stakeholders to facilitate a process of scaling up some of these interventions we have here, to be able to engage in de-radicalization process and reintegration of this key important component. Because as long as we don't want to relate with them, we don't want to see them, that metaphor going, it's not for us, it's not for us, then we are not opening the way. So to break the circle of violence is to create an integration process which has to do with the element of the radicalizations, an element of, we call it face-to-faith reasoning. If you are using faith, to create a problem, create more inspiring messages of inclusiveness that are undiluted within those faith and tradition, engage with the actors, and you'll be able to see that how you are changing that tides.
Okay, thank you. Second, yes, very quickly, Salim, yes.
I would love to add something that has just been said about de-radicalization process. And I don't want to talk that much about myself. To answer to radicalization, we need local and very experienced technical answers. Meaning here, I'm from Brussels. Muslims always lived together in Morocco, sharing the same food, having the same habits, even though they were not praying the same way, the same God, one God. And there is one word that Senor Moratinos used yesterday that was very important in Spanish, convivencia. It's such an important word to use as a tool to go to some places where it makes sense to talk, to remember to those people that, you know, once upon a time, we lived all together. Today, we still live together, but we ignore it. And something that worked very well in prison, and the story I wanted to share with you, is that we used to work with some people that were considered as Moroccans, Algerians, Tunisians, Azeris, Russians from Kafkaz, Chechnya, Dagestan, Turkish people, Bosnia. And all they had in common was that they considered themselves as Muslims. But most of them were Belgians, Belgian citizens. And if you ask them where they're from, they would never answer to you, I'm from Brussels, I'm from Antwerp, I'm from Namur. They would answer to you, I'm from Azerbaijan, I'm from Morocco, I'm from Algeria, even though they never lived there, or some of them lived there but not so many years, not so much, in order to say, I'm from there. But at the same time, that's how they feel. So, and the real problem we had to face, the first issue they brought on the table, more than 80% of them didn't talk about religion the very 5 first minutes. They talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And this is a key. If you listen well to those people, if you listen well to what they say, they don't talk about religion. They talk about the conflict that really they care. And you have to address it instead of saying, oh, you know, you shouldn't address the problem of Holocaust by saying that it never happened. This is the wrong way to answer. So to answer to this question, how to build a counter-narrative to violent extremism, you have to answer with a lot of technique, with technicity. And the way we found with our team was instead of saying to them, you know, you're wrong, you cannot compare Gaza with what happened during the Second World War. We just asked them where they were from. And they say, Azerbaijan, Morocco, Turkey. And we were prepared. We had the tools by having for them, for each of them, one specific story of someone that came from their country they were referring to, that saved Jews during the Second World War, taking risk by saving people during the Second World War. And those stories are untold, forgotten stories, but they exist. It was not coming out of our imagination. We just brought stories that exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Selim, for your very clear. So they are telling me that we are out of time. Okay, but I have another question, but let us, I promise you, to get the audience the possibility to engage in this conversation, this dialogue. So now is your turn. What you want to ask them, me, the organizer, you have the floor. So who wants a lady from there? Introduce yourself, okay? And yellow. Now there is a micro, please.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Sarah Bassin. I come from the United States, and I am curious to hear from any and all of you how you engage with skepticism about your project. How do you turn people who might be adverse to your idea and bring them on board into buying in and being supporters?
You want to answer?
I think skepticism and pessimism is a part of life. At one level, we as individuals and very thinking individuals are somehow skeptic about many ideologies and things and many structures and many hierarchies that exist in this world presently. So for me, if someone is skeptical about my approach, I would like to have a talk to them, heart-to-heart conversation, tell them the success stories, tell them the impact that we have created, and hopefully that ideological gap is bridged. But many times it happens that, especially when you're engaging with the extreme right or the extreme left, both sides of the political divide, because they're so ideologically charged, it's very hard for them to adapt to your worldview, and that's a reality. And then we say agree to disagree. I mean, you can't win everyone. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ali. The second question, this gentleman. We have only one more question. Here. Please.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to, my name is Baku Qureshi. I'm from Denmark. I'm a journalist and work with the media. I think it's wonderful to make good projects, but as a media person, I think it is very important that people should know what you're doing. It's not enough that you do good work, it stays very local or to a certain extent. But important thing is to engage the media, and they can tell the people. Because, for example, the Nigerian experiment with imam and pastor, everybody knows in the world because they have done a wonderful job to attract media. It's the same thing with other projects, that those should be known by the people so that they can react to that.
Thank you. Rhoda, do you want to answer for how to engage media and how to convey the message better? What do you propose?
So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think that for me, independent productions are important. With independent productions, you are able to tell a fuller story, whereas I find with media organizations, they'll want 2 minutes or 5 minutes, and you can't put a person's whole life in 2 minutes. And so just also touching on the question that was asked about skepticism, I found that from our work, interviewing refugees in the last couple of years, there's this sense of fatigue, the sense of they are always telling their story to journalists. And they tell their story, and the journalist goes away and puts their story together, but these people's lives are still in the same situation. And so we got a lot of skepticism from the individuals that we were interviewing, because they wanted to know, how is this going to actually create meaningful impact in my life? How is my life going to change by me telling you my story? And so I think that independent forums are important because we're hearing the other narratives. We're hearing counter-narratives. We're not just hearing vulnerable populations portrayed as suffering or, in extreme conditions. We're learning about the people as well. So.
Thank you. The last question from the audience. Lady, okay, this one. No.
Hey, thank you very much. I'm Jiran Jafarova. Actually, my question is to the very first lady. Like she mentioned that you do gather different children from different backgrounds together, like while playing a games. Like my question is, do you face some challenges while bringing them together? Like while playing, do they have challenges while giving up the background they do belong to? If you face so, how do you overcome them? Thank you.
Neymar, you start. You end.
Hi, thank you for your question. I think sport is a fantastic tool to bring people together. And when bringing people together, you have questions. It's not always easy. What you do is that you create space for these questions and for these challenges. And this is how you unother the other person and create an equal footing. Everyone is on the same spot. And you create interaction. By creating this interaction, you reduce tensions and create more of a social space when people can discuss and get to know each other.
Thank you, Neymar. So the time has come to conclude. Fortunately, unfortunately, depending you were satisfied with this new imaginative, innovative performance in this Baku process. What will be my final remarks? You have seen in every presentation, I think, two moments, slides and images that show distraction, suffering, lack of hope, this tremendous sense of anger, and then at the end, when they finalize the presentation, you will see them with a signal of victory gathered by the community. So these contracts show that, of course, we have, in a world where we have to confront tremendous challenges, mainly in this violent extremism, in this terrorism that is paralyzing ourselves in all kinds of the world. But at the same time, you see that these 14 persons have been able to achieve their goal. They are happy. They are satisfied. They have succeeded. They have brought to the communities, to their partners, a sense of hope, a light of candle, as Jorge has said. So hope, a light can be done. It can be done by young persons that engage themselves in this tremendous challenge to make a better world. So if they can be done at their level, how we are not able to do so? How member states, how governments, how states, how international institutions cannot be at the level of this hope and this strength of these 14 people that have been presented their cases. So again, Mr. Garbayev, so thank you very much for having us the possibility to present this work of our UNAOC. I hope you enjoyed that. And my message, final message, is we have all in a collective spirit to engage in order that we can create a better world and to create this counter-narrative to stop this violent extremism. Thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy. And thank you, my alumni. So please stand up and that
is that you cannot see a raising hand from the front row. How on earth can you see the raising hands from the, grassroots level communities? I have something to say because, it's a youth thing and we don't only have questions, we have something to comment on their projects as well because we come. So I think that was something with a clear hand you could have saw that.
Okay.
The good stories we talk about, there's a lot of miseries, a lot of things that you should have taken 5 or some points from us as well.
Yes, we try. Okay, thank you.